We now have more comprehensive details about what the genetic system will look like in Paralives, thanks to this Patreon post that the team just made public. Hello everyone, it's my first Paralives video for 2026. I hope you're all having an absolutely wonderful new year. I just want to apologize if you can hear any fan noises in the background. It's 43 degrees Celsius here today, which is a bit over 109 degrees if you're a Fahrenheit person, and my computer fans are just kind of going crazy. Anyway, we have a lot to cover today because not only do we have the latest public Patreon post, we also have the monthly summary of what the team worked on in December and what the plans are for January as well. Okay, so starting with genetics, we have the genetics and visual feature inheritance in Paralives post, which was posted on August 9th, 2025 for Patreon members and then made public for everyone today. This is a very detailed post with a lot of information, so I'm going to do my best to summarize and explain exactly what it says. As part of the main overview, they mentioned that they wanted to make a system where the players can notice that certain traits are being passed down through generations of paras, and they also wanted to make it realistic enough but not too complicated. I'm going to start with facial features. So for every facial feature like cheeks, a nose, or a chin, a child para will randomly inherit the entire feature from one of their parents. So a child para might get their nose from one parent and then their cheeks from the other parent, and maybe they have a sibling with the same parents, and that sibling might inherit both the nose and the cheeks from the first parent. So it's all randomly assigned. They'll just get one feature from one parent and another feature from another parent chosen randomly. They said the reason that it's done this way is because it avoids weird mixes of incompatible sliders, which can quickly lead to ugly or extreme results. And originally when I read that, I was a little bit disappointed. I kind of wanted features to be a blend and not just like straight up getting a nose from one parent. And part of that is because I'm biracial myself and my own features are a bit of a blend of like Filipino and Caucasian, and many of them lean more towards one than the other. But honestly, looking at the picture that they included in the facial features section, I actually quite like what they've done. The children here both look different, so they're not carbon copies of each other, but you can also tell that they're related, but you can see the resemblance in both of them to both their mother and their father as well, which is actually pretty cool. So yeah, I actually kind of like it now. I think it looks pretty good from this picture anyway. Obviously, once we're in game, we can see how it's working, but I think I'm pretty happy with this. Something we all know and love about Paralives is the fact that paras can have different heights. I hadn't really thought too much about this before. I guess I just assumed that a para's height would be some midpoint between their parents' heights, but I'm glad I was wrong about that because the reality is a lot more detailed. So height is going to be inherited, but there will be a bit of a variation so that children from the same parents don't all end up at the same height. They've set up short, medium, and tall height categories with different ranges that depend on the para's sex, and apparently that's all based on real-life statistics, which is very, very cool. This works kind of similarly to the facial feature inheritance, so a child para will be randomly assigned to inherit their height from one of their parents. So if a male para inherits their height from their mum and their mum's height fits within the tall height category, then that child para will also grow to be within the tall height category as well, but their actual height will depend on the tall height range for their sex. So in this example, the para would be assigned a height within the male tall height range, and if that's based off real life statistics, then the male tall height range is likelier to be taller than the female tall height range. So kids can end up taller, shorter, or similar height to their parents, and also a different height to their siblings as well. And we can see in this picture that the two siblings ended up at very different heights to each other and also their parents. So one child is a bit taller than both of the parents and the other child is way, way shorter. Okay, next up we have eye, skin, and hair color, hair texture, and freckles, and this is where things get a lot more complicated. Unlike facial features and height, these traits use a simplified dominant and recessive gene model that kind of mimics real life. And can I just say as well, the fact that hair texture is inheritable at all is just amazing. I'm so happy with that. Anyway, if you forgot what dominant and recessive is, or just never knew what it was in the first place, honestly, same, don't worry. I'm going to try and explain a very simplified version of this, but if I make any mistakes, please just correct me in the comments. So, here we go. You get one copy of each gene from both parents, and these are called alleles, but I'm just going to call them genes for simplicity. So a dominant trait is one that can show up even if you only inherit it from one parent. So brown eyes are considered a dominant trait. So if mum passes on the gene for brown eyes and dad passes on the gene for blue eyes, the kid will end up with brown eyes because that is dominant and you only need it once. A recessive trait only appears if both parents pass on the gene. So blue eyes are a recessive trait, so you would need mum and dad to pass on the gene for blue eyes for you to actually end up with blue eyes. And one more thing is that a person can have brown eyes, so they carry the brown eyes gene, but they might also carry the blue eyes gene. So there's the possibility that even though they have the dominant trait of brown eyes, they can pass on the blue eye gene to their child, and their child might end up with blue eyes. So with this system, traits can skip a generation, and this is actually mentioned in the Patreon post as well. So this is really exciting. So hopefully that highly simplified explanation made sense. It is more complicated than that in real life, but I think for the purposes of this video, it doesn't really matter. I think that is a good enough summary. But at the start of this section, I mentioned that hair texture is inheritable, and the team actually used a simplified dominant and recessive gene system for hair texture. How cool is that? So there's 4 genes or alleles where coily is the most dominant and straight is the most recessive. So a child para is more likely to end up with curly hair if one of their parents had curly hair. And this is honestly really impressive. I could not wait to see this working in game. This system, it looks like we've got it for hair color, eye color, skin color, hair texture, and freckles. So yeah, a very advanced system. Like, yeah, more advanced than I was expecting, but very, very cool. So the genetic system itself is used in a few places. One is where you make a para in the para maker. So there's a system that inspects the features of the para and then uses it to assign genetics. So as I mentioned before, for eye color, you'd have a copy of an eye color gene from both parents. And obviously, if you're making a para in para maker, they kind of just end up with one eye color gene because there's no parent. So the system actually automatically assigns another based on how they look. And the post also says that if the para has unnatural traits like pink eyes or green skin, then the genetic data is randomly assigned. And I will mention this again later in the video, so if you're a bit concerned about this, don't worry, there is an alternative. And the second place the genetic system is used is where you make a child from 2 parents, so either in paramaker or in live mode by getting a para pregnant. So obviously this follows the standard genetic rules. The third place it's used is where you add a parent or a sibling in Paramaker. And the last one is not implemented yet, but they mention that they plan to add in an advanced genetics interface so we can control a para's genetics ourselves if we want to. They also include a picture of the UI for creating a para with genetics, but this is definitely an older picture because it doesn't include preteens, which were confirmed later last year, and it also only has the option to create a child or twin, and the post itself mentioned that this will include create a parent and create a sibling as well. We briefly went over this in a previous video because it was mentioned in one of the dev chats, but oh my god, I am still so excited for this. So the whole genetic system was built to be moddable. So with mods, you can add, remove, or modify any trait category that supports genetic inheritance, set up the sliders you want inherited or not inherited, and more. So just before we talked about how offspring won't inherit unnatural colors, so no kid is going to inherit pink hair, for example. Well, with the modding system, we can change that. So if you want a whole family and future generations of pink-haired paras, then it just takes one modder to set that up, and then you can do it. They also mentioned that you could make an alien species with inheritable green skin and also add new accessories like devil horns or Shrek ears and make those inheritable too. I'm thinking also inheritable wings for fairies and maybe fangs for vampires. There's just so many things we can do and I am way too excited about this. Before we move on to the December and January updates, there was also an extra picture that they posted to Twitter that was missing from the Patreon post, which is this little family here. I'm guessing the 2 in the middle are the kids of the 2 paras on the outside, either kids or grandkids. I don't know if the paras look old enough to have grandkids that age, but anyway, looks like they both inherited the nose of the para on the right, but let me know what you guys spot. Moving on to the December and January summary. So the team were very busy in December, and even though they had a break at the end of December, they accomplished quite a lot. So let's go through the list. The first thing they did was create various new interactions and animations for para folks. They created and decorated homes for the town. I hope we get to see some previews of these. I'd be very excited to see some of the decorations and the new town things as well. They also added an in-game help guide to help players learn about how the game's core feature work and added tutorial text that explain the most important features the first time you use them in 1 or 2 sentences. And yeah, I think this was highlighted in the roadmap on Notion They wanted to add in a bunch of tutorials to basically like help people learn how the game works, which I think makes sense, especially for a brand new game. They fixed many issues with pathfinding to make sure all lots can be used without any problem and that townies don't get stuck when walking around town. And I know there were quite a few complaints about townies getting stuck, so really good that they fixed this one already. Created different walk style animations based on the vibe personality trait of the parafolks. This way, townies and parafolks walking around town look more natural as they don't have the same walking animation. That one's kind of cool. I'm curious to see how this one actually looks in practice. That's kind of interesting. Improved townie autonomy to make them visit shops and public lots more often so that they don't feel empty, and also make townies do a bit more interactions autonomously to feel lively. I really like this one as well. I think that will be fun. Added the ability to find parafolks on the town map and call them on the phone to invite them over in order to more easily continue relationship development with a given parafolk that you've met in town. And yeah, I think this was one of the things they originally didn't plan to include for early access, but when they announced the delay, they also announced that this is something that they would include. So I'm guessing this was part of the feedback that they got from playtesters playing the game back in November or October. So really good that we can now invite paras over. Fixed all sorts of bugs that could harm the player experience and immersion. Finished recording Parley voiceover audio and integrating all active voices in the game. Improved the ambient audio mixing and volumes. Finished mastering the soundtrack. Shared a look at the town's lighthouse, shared music tracks made for the town's shops, shared a preview of new parafolks animations, and secrets. I do wonder what the secrets are, but I am also happy that they're not telling us everything, so we get to be surprised when the game comes out. And in January 2026, the plans are to prepare for early access, obviously, so May 25, 2026 is still the planned release date for early access. They are fixing bugs, optimizing game performance, and polishing the gameplay experience following the playtest sessions, and they're polishing the town, adding content and activities to it. So lots more for them to do. I'm not sure how often they're going to be doing updates. I'm guessing they'll probably release some more Patreon posts to the public, which will be really good to see. Anyway, that's all from me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.